So now that Il'Ganot's whispers are out of the way, we can talk about what I actually wanted to talk about last week. I mentioned it briefly in that video, which you can watch right here, and is the question of today's. What is Medivh? And I ask what he is, because his status after Warcraft 1 is, it's foggy, it's convoluted, unknown, and might be confusing to some. Now, I have answered this question before, way back, like 2 or so years ago now, but I think I can explain it better now than I could before. So because of how confusing Medivh might be, we need context. How did he get into this convoluted situation? Why is Medivh so confusing? And, well, for those who might be unaware, Medivh was initially killed in Warcraft 1. He was beheaded by his closest allies after falling victim to Sargeras' influence, something he carried since his birth. Now that was the end of the Guardian, at least how we knew him. He was buried outside of Karazhan and didn't come into play until much later. Cue Warcraft 3, Reign of Chaos. In Warcraft 3, Medivh was seen again, and he stated that he came back from the dead to ensure the world would defeat the Burning Legion. And as we kind of guessed, since there's a World of Warcraft and almost 9 expansions now, he succeeded and took his place. Actually, hold on, no. I'm gonna let him say it.
As for me, I came back to ensure that there would be a future, to teach the world that it no longer needed guardians. The hope for future generations has always resided in mortal hands. And now that my task is done, I will take my place amongst the legends of the past.
Now, it isn't until much later that we learned that Aegwynn, Medivh's mother and the previous Guardian of Tirisfal, actually revived Medivh, and she did this after Medivh's lingering spirit, which was stuck in the Twisting Nether, contacted her and allowed the Magus to summon him back into Karazhan. Now, if you need more information to go off of, I'm pretty sure Noble87, that giant sexy hunk of a man, has done a video on the Last Guardian. You can go check his channel out and watch a more in-depth summary of Medivh over there. But continuing with this one. Now, it wouldn't be until patch 7.1 where we finally got to see what Medivh was doing again, in all terms and purposes. He was technically alive at the end of Warcraft 3, he just disappeared and let others take his place, so when he showed up in 7.1, it was a welcome surprise, but like all good things, Medivh left after Karazhan was secured and flew off into the Twisting Nether, the place his spirit was summoned from. But then, a little while later, we got to the whereabouts of Wrathion, the quest chain in 8.2.5 that reintroduced the Black Prince into the story of the game and raised today's question. Now, I did a whole video on it, but to summarize, Wrathion has been looking for a way to defeat the old gods for good, the first step being something that can counter their whispers and influence. If you want to know more, you can go watch my video I did a few weeks ago. I'll put it up right here. But for this video, all you need to know is that Wrathion's search took him to Karazhan, where he found the knowledge to create a concoction that can block out N'Zoth's influence, which is a pretty large step toward creating perfect immunity. But then, as you're reading his journal, Wrathion states that he had a conversation with Medivh's lingering spirit, which I can only assume is the same one we encountered in 7.1. But that same Medivh is also the one that said this when we found him.
I've left so many fragments of myself throughout this tower.
Which, if you put 2 and 2 together, Wrathion might have spoken to one of Medivh's fragments and not the actual thing. In his journal, Wrathion has this weird way of describing Medivh's spirit when Medivh speaks about himself. For example, Wrathion writes, "But Medivh also spoke of his spirit's return to the mortal realm and how it guided Azeroth's champions in the fight against the very forces that once corrupted him." How Wrathion words it, it sounds like there's 2 different Medivhs involved here. The first being the lingering spirit, the one Wrathion's talking to, and the second being the Medivh who played Prophet in Warcraft 3. It's weird, I know, but Medivh himself is really weird. There's so many versions of him, whether it be a fragment or an illusion or a spirit. It's honestly hard to differentiate between them all, and they all play a role in the question of the video. So with that context out of the way, what is he? What is Medivh? Well, he's not human. He states that himself.
Human? I left my humanity behind long ago. I am something different now.
And if he isn't human, there's no way he's undead, so it leaves us with two possible options. One, he's a demon. Now, I've said this before, and it still holds weight. Medivh spent a long time with the presence of Sargeras within him. He practically grew up with a literal demon god inside of him, and at times, Sargeras did take control. When you put it into comparison with a demon hunter, it almost sounds like the same thing. Both have demons within them, both struggle to maintain control, and both have had their spirits linger in the twisting nether. But then we get to option 2. While you could say Medivh is a demon, Medivh didn't have just some random fell hunter or imp or succubus inside of him like an Illidari. He had the essence of a literal titan within him. He had a god fight for control of his life. Now, option 2 may or may not be canon, because it comes from the RPG, which is not canon in Warcraft unless stated otherwise. But in the RPG, Medivh is classified as an Eternal, and an Eternal are demigods. They are immortal beings of the Warcraft universe that molded the history of Azeroth and made it what it is today. For example, Medivh would be amongst the likes of Malorn, the Loa, the Titans, Elune, Queen Ajara, etc. Now, it honestly doesn't sound like much, considering it says that those who've changed the world for better or for worse are Eternals, and so with that logic, we, the player, would be on that list as well. But the company Medivh would have in that classification, there's literal gods. And with there being gods and demigods, etc., Medivh could very well just be a demigod himself. But what do you think? Do you think Medivh is a demon? Do you think he's this Eternal? Or maybe you think he's both? You can let me know your thoughts, as well as all questions, comments, and concerns regarding this video, WoW, or its lore, in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.